Hi and welcome to a Whimsy Stamps video. Today I'm going to be sharing how I created this watercolor scene using this beautiful red rubber background stamp from Whimsy Stamps. I have some Bristol smooth cardstock and I'm going to be stamping this stamp with some ink that is used to create kind of a faint outline of the stamp. You can use really pale tan brown color inks for this, and my goal is to color my image before my ink completely fades away and I can't see my image anymore. So I'm going to be using my Zig Clean Color Real brushes, and I start by applying color where the image is on my paper, and then I'm going to use my blender to just blend that color and just give my image a little more shape and color. So I'm going to use this really pretty kind of pine green for all the trees, and then I have a brown or a warm gray that I'm using to color in my mountains behind my trees. So just like with my trees, I added my color and then using my blender brush to kind of blend that color out and fill in my image. And this image is called the Mountain Columbine Rubber Cling Stamp, and it's just such a beautiful picture. I love this scene and I really love how it's going to turn out, but I thought it would be fun just to watercolor because most of my projects I tend to do are kind of cartoony and cutesy, so I thought I would step out of my comfort zone for the Whimsy Stamped video today and just play with my watercolor and have some fun. So after I finish the blue for the lake that's in this image, I'm bringing out my sand brown color and just coloring the ground where my image is, so around the water, underneath these trees, and behind these tropical flowers that we're going to have in the front. So now I have a lighter green and I use that to fill in below any trees and then as well as these leaves for these flowers that are in the foreground. And then I have a darker shade of green just to add some texture and definition back to those leaves. Because they are in the foreground, I want them to be a lot more bold than what's behind it in the background. Now for my flowers, I went with pink, and I know the image on the Whimsy Stamps store has these as more of a purple and white flower, but I just thought it'd be really fun to make them pink and tropical. So the inside of my flower is yellow, and then I'm using a pink and blending those two together. Kind of creates a little bit more of an orangey center, but that's really pretty, and I like how it turns out because I want that yellow center and that pink flower. So that kind of orange blend just looks really pretty. Once I'm done with the inside of the flower, I'm going to also do pink for the outside petals, so kind of like the petals underneath the smaller petals. And this time I'm only going to do the pink. And once that's blended in, I'm grabbing a darker pink, and just like I did with those leaves and stems, I'm adding more definition back into my flowers because I want them to look more bold and just really stand out on the card. I'm bringing in some teal to add a little more texture to the color of my lake. And then once that's done, I wanted to have a blue sky, but I wanted it to kind of fade from the top. So it wasn't an overwhelming blue background. It was a little more white. So I put some blue ink and then used my blender pen just to blend that color down into the scene. Now I have my paper trimmer and I'm going to trim down my scene. And I'm just trimming off the bottom and side to start my cut on my image to get my overall size. And I know that the width is normally 5.5, so I'm just scooting over 1/4 inch by 1/4 inch until I get to 4 3/4. So it is 3/4 less than an A2 size card. So I know that the other way is 4 1/4, so I scoot it down to 3.5, and that way I have an even cut on all 4 sides. So now I notice that I lost all of my blue sky. So I'm just going to kind of repeat what I did earlier, just adding blue into the scene. And then this time I'm using a water brush to really kind of dilute that blue and blend it into my background. Now I thought about matting my picture on this pretty kind of craft cardstock and then putting it on a white card base, but I thought it looked kind of like a picture frame and I thought that was kind of fun. So I am going to trim down my craft paper. I'm going to trim it so it's 1/4 inch smaller than an A2 size. So I'm trimming it down to 5 1/4 by 4. So here I am just measuring it and making sure I'm happy with that before I cut, because we always measure twice and cut once, so we're not sad. And I am just lining it up with my trimmer here, and now I have what's going to be my picture frame. And when I see picture frames, I always think about how the pieces of wood are kind of butted up to each other. So I am cutting this along the diagonal from one point to the other using my paper trimmer, and then I will have 4 pieces of this craft paper. And then I thought, to make it look more like a picture frame, I should distress the edges. So I'm getting out my Distress Oxide in Vintage Photo, and I'm just using a blender brush to add some color to the edges of what's going to be now my picture frame. So I'm applying it on the inside where the pieces will meet, and then along the edge, which will be shown on the outside of my watercolored image. To help me glue all of this together, I'm going to get out some repositional tape just to help me hold these 4 pieces of my craft paper together. So I'm going to flip them over and then use that tape to help keep those 2 pieces nice and snug together. And I'm going to connect all 4 like a little puzzle. And then I'm going to check and see how it looks, and it does look like a picture frame, and I'm really excited with how it's turning out. Now my picture looks a little big for the frame just because of math and geometry. So I'm going to trim a little bit more off of the width of my picture. I kind of extended the scene a little, and turned out that I didn't really need to for it to fit nicely into the same corners. That way the frame meets the corners of my inside image. So now I can start gluing everything together. I thought I would keep this card flat instead of giving it dimension, and it would be a fun way to maybe add dimension with a sentiment later on once I determine the occasion for this card. So just using my wet glue, I adhered down the craft to my white card base, and now I'm adhering my image to the center of the craft, and I have my cute little picture perfect watercolor scene. And I can add a sentiment later on once, like I said, I have an occasion for this card, or it might just sit on my desk forever. So a final look at this pretty watercolor card using the Mountain Columbine rubber cling stamp. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and it inspires you to try something out of your comfort zone, like watercoloring one of the Whimsy stamps background stamps. You can find links down below for everything that I used to create this card. I hope you'll click like, and if you're new here, that you'll subscribe. Make sure you check out all of our social media links down below. Have a great day!